Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you a weekly update on the Russian aggression against Ukraine between August 14th and 20th. Combat situation across the front line remains rather tense, yet well controlled by Ukrainian armed forces. Russia-backed militants increased the number of heavy weapons used, especially in the Mariupol sector, where instances of artillery fired by the enemy were recorded throughout the week. Overall, militants opened fire 71 times at Ukrainian positions along the front line using heavy weapons, which is 40% of all truce violations last week. The total number of ceasefire violations by the enemy amounted to 229 episodes. The number of ceasefire violations ranged between 47 yesterday, August 20th, at the highest point, and 25 on Friday, August 18th, at the lowest. In the Luhansk sector, the enemy attacked Ukrainian armed forces for the most part in Popasna district and at the Bakhmut Road area. Novolexandrivka and Novozvanivka villages were the major hotspots in Popasna area. In Krymsky, attacks of Russian proxies remained the most intense compared to other Ukrainian strongholds of the Bakhmut Road. In both areas, militants intensified shellings after dark. At the same time, in Krymsky, the enemy used heavy weapons more often than elsewhere in the Luhansk sector. The heaviest enemy shelling in the Luhansk sector of the week took place in Krymsky on Friday, August the 18th. Then, within an hour after midnight, the enemy fired at Ukrainian positions more than 60 mortar bombs. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 4 and 19. Donetsk sector. Combat actions took place throughout the entire front line. However, about half of all instances of ceasefire violations by the enemy accounted for Avdiivka. There, Russian proxies were engaging Ukrainian positions from three directions, namely Yakovlivka, Yasenovata, and Spartak. The enemy used mortars and armored vehicles during every other attack in Avdiivka. However, militants did not limit their arsenal exclusively to mortars and infantry fighting vehicles. Occasionally, they opened fire using tanks, as well as rocket and cannon artillery. In addition, Ukrainian positions at Svitlodarsk, Gorlivka perimeter, and near the Donetsk airport remain areas of most enemy attention in the Donetsk sector. In these areas, Moscow-controlled militants continued to violate ceasefire regime using small arms and light weapons, and occasionally reverting to heavy weapons. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy in the Donetsk sector ranged between 9 and 21. In the Mariupol sector, the major militant confrontation took place in the Mariinka district and in the frontline area close to the Azov Sea. The latter area accounted for the vast majority of enemy fire episodes in the sector. Day after day, militants shelled Ukrainian positions in Pavlopil, Gnutove, Vodyane, and Shorokine. Another peculiarity of last week's hostilities in the Mariupol sector was the active use of heavy weapons by the enemy, especially high-caliber artillery and portable rocket launchers Grad Partizan. For instance, on Wednesday, August the 16th, the enemy has been shelling Ukrainian positions near Starognativka for an hour after having fired 40 artillery rounds. The same day, Grad Partizan launchers and 122mm howitzers were used by the enemy near Vodyane village. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 3 and 18. Over the week, Ukrainian troops registered 7 episodes of enemy drones performing aerial reconnaissance. Ukrainian military intelligence confirmed that one of the UAVs was launched from Russian territory neighboring with Stanitsa Luhanska district and Luhansk region. Chief Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reports of the ongoing military assistance of Moscow to its proxies in eastern Ukraine. Russia has delivered 360 tons of fuel and 6 railway tank cars, which is 3 times less than a week earlier. Such a decrease of fuel deliveries resulted in shortages of petrol at gas stations in the towns of Terez and Snizhne in Donetsk region. Additionally, Russia delivered 3 train cars with ammunition for its proxies, bringing 3 T-72 main battle tanks, as well as 1 multiple launch rocket system Grad to the occupied territory of eastern Ukraine. As per intelligence reports, the total number of casualties amongst Russian proxies is 30 killed and 51 wounded over the week. In addition, enemy lost a tank, a mortar, and a truck in combat. Last week, 1 Ukrainian serviceman was killed in action, and 27 service members were wounded in action. This includes 4 wounded as a result of booby trap explosions. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the fallen Ukrainian hero. Last week, 6 private homes in the frontline area were damaged by enemy shellings. In addition, a power line segment in Yasynovata district was damaged by enemy fire. 31 non-residential buildings in the Donetsk sector were damaged by Russia-backed militants during the hostilities last week. Some of these buildings were burned down during the fire accidents caused by the enemy shellings. Militants widely use incendiary ammunition with the aim of setting fire in the territories controlled by Ukrainian service members, trying to force them out and leave their positions. Nevertheless, such enemy attempts are all in vain. Ukrainian armed forces secure territories according to Minsk agreements and fight these deliberate attacks using specialized firefighting vehicles. Often, Ukrainian military help firefighting services to promptly eliminate fire, saving lives and property of civilian population. Over the week, Ukrainian authorities arranged for access and safe passage through government checkpoints on the contact line of the 5 trucks loaded with humanitarian aid for civilians living in the territories in eastern Ukraine that are temporarily uncontrolled by Ukrainian armed forces. 62 tons of hygiene products, medicine, and building materials were provided by the International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as by the International Foreign Charity Fund. That will be all for today. Thank you very much.